A lot of times when people attack democracy, they say something like, well, even Hitler was elected democratically. That's a myth. He was never elected democratically, at least not in any actually democratic election. He later gained the majority, but that was at a time when Hitler already outlawed all competing parties. So if you're the only party, it's not too hard to get a vast majority of the votes. But yeah, that was when he already seized power, and the way he gained power was not at all because he was democratically elected. He was never actually democratically elected. He never actually had a ruling majority, and Hindenburg was in power. The only reason and the only way Hitler was able to gain power was because of the Reichstag Fire. Yeah, so you probably know what happened. So, yeah, it was, it was blamed on this guy here, um, a Dutch guy, I think. Uh, but it was a huge fire. It was supposed to be just one guy. That doesn't make sense. Um, anyway, this was then used by Hitler saying, oh, like we're under attack and, our government building is being attacked. And, and you have this iconic picture, by the way, here it says, the German people, it says on the building, or for the German people. So you have this, very iconic government building, and it's yeah, it's obviously being attacked by someone. Um, yeah, so this Dutch guy was arrested, but it's very unlikely that he acted alone. Um, and it was never really determined what actually happened there, and a lot of people actually say, well, it was actually the Nazis who orchestrated that whole thing and who instigated that whole thing, because then afterwards, what happened is that Hitler said, well, our sacred government building is under attack, so now we have to do an emergency degree, yes. And then they started outlawing all, yeah, well, they basically, and for the remainder of Hitler being in power, the National Socialists disbanded all civil liberty. And actually, the first thing they actually, and it doesn't mention that on the Wikipedia article, but what they also disposed of, and what one of the rights, basically they disposed of all the rights people had in the Weimar Republic. It mentions here, right to a free trial, and freedom of expression, freedom of press, freedom of association, freedom of assembly, secrecy of the post and telephone. All of those rights were disbanded, actually indefinitely, and actually they also disbanded the rights to private property. They also used that as well. It just doesn't mention that in the Wikipedia article for some reason. Strange. It's almost as if Wikipedia doesn't want people to realize that the National Socialists were actually socialists. Anyway, yeah. So that's history. I found it very interesting. I'm not trying to make any connection here, but I do admit that the reason I thought about that, why am I thinking about that now, is because this article here reminded me of it. And actually, Trump yesterday, I can't show it to you because I still think I want to probably post this video on YouTube. And Trump made a video just, saying for the protesters to be peaceful, and for the protesters to disband now and go home, and to obey the police. That's pretty much all he said in the video. Um, Yeah, Twitter took that down, YouTube took that down, and Facebook took that down. You can't post that video anywhere, basically. And I don't know what's so bad about this video, but the reasoning, it was just, Trump telling people, hey, be peaceful, obey the police, and actually disband now, go home now. That's all he said. I don't know what's bad about that, but apparently, I don't know. Maybe some people don't want the protesters to be peaceful. Maybe some people don't want the protesters to hear that and to actually, go home and be peaceful and obey the police. Obviously, some people don't want that, and it's obviously not the protesters. Apparently, it's big tech, because this video, with a very clear, peaceful message, and with the message of the protesters to go home, to the protesters to go home, it was deleted everywhere. On the internet, all the major social media companies banned it immediately. And here, the reason I was reminded of that historic stuff was because of the reasoning Twitter gave. It's the guy in charge there at Twitter said this is an emergency situation. And we are taking appropriate emergency measures, including removing President Trump's video. And because he said emergency measures, and because it was because a government building was attacked, obviously, that made me make the connection. And this isn't the only time. It gets mentioned the entire time now. It's always because of emergency here as well. After the Capitol was breached by the protesters, the mayor of Washington put out a curfew, but saying this is an emergency, so we're putting out a curfew. And then the protesters were disbanded when the curfew started. But now that that's over and the protesters were disbanded and now actually the curfew would be over, the curfew was supposed to go until the morning of the next day. And actually the curfew would now be over. But it isn't because, surprise, he says, no, it's still an emergency. We have to extend the emergency measures and we have to extend the restrictions to free speech and freedom of assembly. And so no one can gather in all of downtown Washington for like 15 days now. Great. And again, using emergency as the excuse. And to go back to the Reichstag fire, a lot of people actually, think, this couldn't have been just one guy. He must have had help. So a lot of people say he must have had help from the National Socialists, or he must have had help from Antifa. Because the guy who was ultimately blamed for it was actually a communist, and Antifa was very big at that time in Germany, and they're just the type of guys to do something like that. And actually, they're actually they they already helped the National Socialists to come to power. You can Google that. It was actually the communists originally that went into an alliance with the National Socialists, so that initially the National Socialists could try and gain a majority. So they were actually having a political alliance with the National Socialists, and they were actually supporting the National Socialists. So here outwardly it seems that maybe Antifa was attacking the government out of protest against the National Socialists. And maybe some of them, if they did that, actually believed that. But in reality, at that time, Antifa wasn't opposed to the National Socialists at all. And like I said, the communists actually helped the National Socialists to gain power in the first place, and maybe they helped with that as well. I don't know, but it seems logical. And obviously the National Socialists are covering up something, because obviously it wasn't just one guy who did that. Um, so, yeah, and a lot of people don't know that. They think, well, Antifa means they're anti-fascists. Yes, but that at that time, and originally, didn't actually refer to the National Socialists at all. The National Socialists initially was, they were more like their friends, and they were helping each other. They were not seen as the evil fascists by the original Antifa before Hitler came to power. That was the moment to actually do something against National Socialism. But that's exactly the moment where Antifa didn't do something about the National Socialists at all, and even helped them, and the anti-fascists, that they were fighting against, those were not the National Socialists. That was the SPD. Those were the Social Democrats. Those were the guys who were in power during the Weimar Republic. That's the fascists that Antifa is opposed to. That's the fascists they were fighting. They weren't fighting the National Socialists at all. You can all look that up. It's probably even on Wikipedia. You just have to look it up yourself, because I don't have the time right now. But you can look that up yourself, even though it's probably only mentioned on the German Wikipedia. Anyway, the fascists, the Antifa was fighting at that time, when the Nazis and the National Socialists actually were about to gain power, were never the National Socialists. Only later on, after the National Socialists, where they say like, oh, no, we were fighting against the National Socialists. They never fought against the National Socialists. The fascists they were fighting against, the people who they called fascists, were never the National Socialists. It was the Social Democrats. It was the Social Democrats in power during the Weimar Republic. So again, they were actually helping the National Socialists, fighting towards the same thing, fighting against the Weimar Republic, the same thing the National Socialists were fighting against. So they were actually, again, here helping the National Socialists, yes. Yeah, because you might be asking yourself, well, why would he be fighting against the Weimar Republic and against the Social Democrats ruling in the Weimar Republic? Well, aren't Social Democrats left-winged as well? Why would left-wing people fight against left-wing people? Because Antifa wanted to gain power, and they what they ultimately want, they want socialism. The National Socialists want socialism, so they weren't seen as the enemy at all. And Antifa wants socialism, and even though the Social Democrats, are also left wing, they don't actually want socialism. They want to retain democracy. So they were in the way. So both Antifa and the National Socialists were attacking the more moderate Social Democrats, and were, using violent means and very underhanded tactics to gain power. And it was never through democratic election. It was, well, at best, it was, through elections that they controlled.